You're very welcome as you're joining us here in the Cathedral Hall at St Eugene's Cathedral in the centre of Derry this nice spring day. I'm here for one of a series of conversations about education and specifically about Catholic education. And with me today I've got Mrs. Brenda Edwards. Mrs. Edwards, to those of you who know her either from teaching in Mahara or her teaching now in St Joseph's College in Derry. Brenda, you're very welcome here to have our conversation. You've come through a programme of ongoing formation for Catholic teachers, which clearly you chose to do in recent years. Tell us what sort of qualifications and studies you've been doing. One was a master's and one was a complementary programme, shall we say?
I finished my master's last year, and that was a master's in education. And during my final year of my master's, I was offered the opportunity of doing the Shepherding Talent course. Therese Ferry had emailed in the information to her principal, and her principal, Mrs. Dean, had put that out to staff. As a newly appointed, I'm in my second year as a senior manager. So as a newly appointed manager and someone who is new into leadership, I felt it was really important that we don't lose sight of Catholic distinctiveness amongst school improvement and target setting and outcomes and everything else. So I felt that the Shepherding Talent really complemented the last year of my master's course, and the two ran alongside of each other, so it was really beneficial.
So it was a master's in education initially in St Mary's University College in Belfast.
Yes.
And that was in a particular area of leadership or of education, or was it a general master?
It was a general master's
Okay.
in education, and my dissertation focused particularly on literacy underachievement amongst boys in disadvantaged areas in particular. And the school that I'm in, St Joseph Boys' School, is in a disadvantaged area with high free school meal, high SEN, in particular. A high proportion of those special educational needs is social emotional. And I felt that we all know that we can't make excuses for underachievement. You can't use social disadvantage as an excuse for underachievement and poor outcomes. So it's about giving the boys the best provision, and it's about understanding that improving literacy levels is one of the best routes out of poverty. And it's too important. And it's too big, and it is beyond English, and I'm biased because I am head of English as well. This is about building functional human beings that can lead healthy, balanced life and become employable citizens, so it's a much bigger picture.
One of those recent books by Pope Francis is Let Us Dream, and I suppose part of what a good teacher wants to do for their pupils is to help them dream.
Absolutely.
To do more than other people expect them to be capable of achieving.
Absolutely, and I feel that we're doing that day in and day out at St Joseph's. Our role is nurture-based, and it's not just about the outcomes. This is about holistic development, and so much of the course that I did in the Shepherding Talent was about the holistic development of children, and part of that is building esteem and building belief and having relentless expectations that they do better and they strive for better. And even my current GCSE group, I told them last year, I told them, and they were like, "Miss, English is really tough, English is really hard," and I says, "You'll get it," and I says, and better than that, we're going to do it 6 months early. And those boys are sitting with full cash in GCSE 6 months early because it's a systematic belief structure where it's more than an outcome. And as a result of that now, they want to do better in maths, they want to do better in science, and it's about pushing expectations relentlessly.
I can do this.
I can do this.
That sense of achievement.
I can do it, but it's more than words. It's a feeling, and it's something that they read in you as a human being. Where children, I think, are absolutely so able to pick up on when you're being genuine. So it's about that belief where you've got to believe it yourself as a human. You've got to have it in you to believe that these children can do better, and most importantly, they will. And that boils back down then to what are we as a school doing? Because this is more than just where they come in 20 to 9 until 3 o'clock. It's much bigger than that. So it's what we do in that time and those hours that makes the impact.
And I suppose English, your subject, is very important. In
Yes.
that those who can express themselves with confidence, can sell themselves, can create a world in which they say, yeah, I actually can achieve here rather than fail here.
And they're always told through primary school about the importance of English and maths, you know, and as a leader, I know the importance when we're looking at statistics and outcomes of A star to C, including maths and English. It all boils back down to our core subjects. And I think because it's so embedded in the boys and because they hear it so often, it's always at the forefront of their mind where they really want to do well in it. And it's about pushing that and building a curriculum, you know, a curriculum for all. And we're an achievement for all school. You know, so it's, well, if we're an achievement for all school, how does our curriculum reflect that? Show me the curriculum that reflects an achievement for all school, that caters for all boys of all abilities, with so many different personalities. How do we give them what they need to do better and to know better? Because when they know better, they can do better.
And I suppose the ability to articulate what's going on inside you,
Absolutely.
to be creative, to be able to communicate, whether through poetry or drama or prose or whatever, that can be an important skill, because people can have experiences and be unable to put words on them.
I think it's so important, Bishop Donal. We've had a big focus on that. When I started at St Joseph's, and I'm now in my third year, one of the first things I did was introduce compulsory drama as a distinct subject at Key Stage 3, because it's so important that the boys are given explicit opportunities in a timetabled manner where they're allowed to express themselves in a safe, structured space, and they rush to drama. They love it, and we're very lucky to get a new head of department at the same time who came in, and it's fantastic in terms of what the boys do. On top of that, we have very recently launched a new project called Shaping Mindsets, and this was on the back of a residential that I did in America, a leadership residential in America that I was chosen for through St Mary's University in Belfast, and we went over and it was just peace, and how do we build pupils that can function in areas where peace has been disturbed? How do we re-engage? How do we teach them the art of dialogue? And how it's so important to listen, and not to listen for the sake of listening, but listen, you know, so you're able to respond effectively. And as a result, we introduced a new project called Shaping Mindsets, and that was introduced to staff in January, and we officially launched it last Thursday, and the mayor was in, and we had different people from different organisations in, and it's about teaching boys that how they think influences their language and influences their actions, and it's about being mindful of that. So we're working now in unison with Thinking Changes, Young Plato, which looks at philosophical inquiry and about teaching boys to think a little differently, and it's based on their project in a school in Ardoyne in Belfast, a very tough school, very tough primary school, all boys, Catholic, in a disadvantaged area.
Holy Cross boys?
That mirrored our own with... it was just, the project's astounding, and you see it in action in this Young Plato video that they do to prove that we're never going to use social disadvantage as an excuse, because this is it in action. You know, you see the boys beginning to reflect on their own thinking, and they actually have a thinking wall where they're given the time to actively process, well, hold on, I made this decision and it resulted in this outcome, so in future maybe I need to do things a little bit differently. And for pupils, they need a safe place, somewhere, adults, and a setting that's going to give them the opportunity to think a little bit differently and to have that courage to just pause.
You've obviously got a passion for the welfare of young people,
Yes.
and particularly for boys who sometimes tell a story about themselves being disadvantaged and they play down their own abilities. And Catholic education seems to me to be very important to you as well, as giving something extra above and beyond the technical information that you got. You talked about shepherding.
The shepherding talent really stressed that, and it was, it talked about, Catholic leadership, and it talked about, visually what a Catholic school looks like, but then it really went into, the finer details in terms of how Catholicism and Catholic ethos in a school should be lived, not laminated. It's not something we should see on a wall. It's not something, you don't feel a Catholic school by coming in and simply seeing a statue. You feel it. It's an embedded culture within a school. It's how the children are treated. It's your expectations. It's your aspirations. It's staff interactions. It's your curriculum. It's much bigger. And I felt that the course really delved into that really deeply, where it talked about this pursuit of excellence, and it talked about servant leadership, and it, and bearing witness. But it talked about what the part I really enjoyed was about being unapologetic for your standards, because every child has a right, regardless of circumstance, to achieve their God-given potential. And it's up to us, particularly within our setting as a Catholic school, with a Catholic ethos, to make sure that we're giving them that opportunity.
I remember a book, must be over 30 years ago, Catholic Schools and the Common Good, published by Harvard University Press by Brickley in Holland. They emphasised one of the characteristics of Catholic education they discovered in the States was high expectations.
Absolutely.
And obviously, I hear you saying the same thing. We believe in a God who believes that our pupils are capable of great things, and nobody's going to put them down.
No.
And they aren't going to be allowed to put themselves down either.
And we are incredibly defensive of that at St. Joseph's, where we will challenge outright, and we challenge the boys to behave in a manner that is reflective of what we expect. And we expect staff to set example, to model what those behaviours look like, because children are seeing it, children see it, and it's about what they learn from you when you're not teaching. It's very easy to stand and teach a curriculum. What are you teaching in between those times in your interactions with the children? How are you greeting them in the morning? How are they welcomed into school? How are you treating them on their worst day? Are you showing them the level of compassion that they need in that moment? Because they're a child. And regardless of what social dysregulation they're experiencing at that point, it's within that Catholic ethos and that distinctiveness that we deal with them in a really nurture-based approach.
And in some ways that's quite countercultural in some ways, where the emphasis is so much on achieving, as if education was about, as they say, finding how intelligent or how smart you are. You're looking to see how people are smart rather than how smart they are, because they'll be smart in different ways and able to contribute to the welfare of the school community, if only they can believe that they have something to offer.
Absolutely. And if you have a child leaving your school with a pass and a GCSE but has experienced 5 or 7 years of poor relationships, then what's been achieved? What has actually been achieved outside of what's on paper? So it's about striving for much more than that, and building those expectations around what is it you want them to leave with. You want them to leave as functional, well-rounded individuals, and that was part of the Shepherd and Talent course, about this absolute drive for holistic development, developing the children spiritually, emotionally, academically, and also, Bishop Donal, you're going back to the basics in terms of my masters, in terms of Maslow and Bloom. Children have to feel safe and loved. Children will become the best version of themselves when they are looked after first in terms of their core needs. When they know that you're happy to see them, when they know that you expect better, the simple things, a breakfast in the morning. The boys come in every morning at 8 o'clock, and we're very lucky. We have a free breakfast club every morning from 8 to half 8. So the boys come in and they sit. The principal and the vice principal every morning without fail is up in the middle of the boys, and they are sitting amongst the boys. That's your servant leadership, and that's everything that we did on the Shepherding Talent course was about how Jesus sat amongst his disciples. You don't lead from the front or above, you lead from within, because then people feel it and you've got that solidarity and you'll get that movement forward.
Pope Francis has a lovely image in one of his encyclical letters about the role of the shepherd. Sometimes the shepherd goes ahead, showing the way. Sometimes the shepherd walks in the middle, walking with them.
And we did about the Good Shepherd as well in our course, but it was about he knew his sheep.
Yeah.
He knew who he was dealing with. It's about knowing the pupils that you're working with.
And the other third point that Pope Francis mentioned also was sometimes stayed at the back to keep an eye on the ones who were super straggling. Leadership can take different forms at different times. I'm just conscious this is the Jubilee of Hope, where we're asked to be pilgrims of hope.
Yes.
I hear you echoing that theme in some ways without saying it. You want to give young people hope for the future.
Yes.
At a time when there's much gloom and much negativity about.
Yes. And it's so important, because I think when children come in through the door in the morning, we have a lot of vulnerable children. We have children in care. You have children from different backgrounds that are coming into the school, and you can never ever take for granted that every child has been exposed to hope. It's in an ideal world, yes. So you become that source of hope, and we're their safe place from when they come in the morning from 8 o'clock from breakfast club and until they leave, they will constantly get that affirmation from us that they have us, that it's a safe place, and that there is hope, regardless of where they feel their deficit is, whether that be socially, emotionally, or on a skill-based level, whatever it is they're struggling with. I think what's so important within a Catholic school is, as you just said, becoming that consistent source of hope.
And I suppose you're talking about how you help the boys to dream, but it's also important for fellow members of staff.
Absolutely.
Because teaching is tough.
Teaching's tough, and leadership's tough.
Leadership's
yes.
tough. And you need to be encouraging one another and learning from one another. I mean, a good teaching environment for the teachers is just as important as a teaching environment for the pupils.
Yeah.
And people sense when staff get on well with one another in professional ways.
Absolutely, and I think what was really important through my masters at St Mary's in Belfast is this distinct difference between management and leadership. It's very easy to manage people. Leadership's a completely different skill. You're instilling a confidence and a level of trust in people, where they will come with you, and that takes time, and it takes building relationships, and it also, I would never ask a member of staff to do something that I am not doing myself, never, So it's about placing egos aside and going back to the root purpose of everything we do, driven by a moral and imperative that everything we do is for the pupils.
What I hear you saying there really is that, Catholic education gets hammered from all sorts of sides, as if we were bad, but I think you have a great confidence, a great faith in Catholic education and its contribution to building a steady future for our young people.
Absolutely. It's as I said, it's what Catholic education offers is more than education in the academic sense. It's building well-rounded individuals. It's providing opportunities. It's providing hope. And Catholic education provides such a secure setting that reassures pupils that regardless of what area you were born in, regardless of where you were born, regardless of the struggles you had coming up through primary school, for example, in my situation, there's always hope. There's always room for improvement, because you have a school full of specialists that fully believe in you and will fully provide the level of nurture and support that you need to get you over the line and to make sure that you're looked after.
This has been a fascinating conversation, Brenda. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
First of all, for coming along today for the conversation. Secondly, for taking on this serious master's level professional development. And thirdly, for having it couched in that context of shepherding talent, because that's really what schools are about, rather than just communicating content. Thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you,
I hope some of our listeners will have enjoyed it and feel inspired themselves to believe, even when the going gets tough, the tough can get going. Thank you very much for being with us again today, reflecting on Catholic education as we face the future, as we try to be pilgrims of hope in 2025, and we are all committed to the welfare of our young people in a dangerous and difficult time. We believe they're fit for great things. God believes they're fit for great things, and we want to share that dream with them. Thank you, Slán, and God bless.